Tim Lieb, the president of Regents Blue Shield of Washington, if you want to come up. Mark Stenzager, board member at the Washington State Health Benefit Exchange and former health system executive. Grab a chair.
Where do you want
Let me sit here. So, yeah, these guys literally, I mean, I just grabbed them 5 minutes ago and said, hey, do you want to come up on stage and talk? So thank you guys for being flexible and for your support of this and our work. We thought that this kind of conversation would be one that bridges both policy and the market, and that Attorney General Ferguson could come in and join us in the middle of it, and it would be great, and that it was different from our other two keynotes during the day. So, Tim, let me ask you first, running Regents in Washington State, Regents is particularly engaged in working with associations and has been historically and maybe in the future working with state employees. What are the kinds of things you're spending your mental energy on, thinking about, planning for at Regents Blue Shield as you try to navigate this time of uncertainty in healthcare?
You know, really, the thing that kind of keeps, I think, all of us up, and I think everyone can attest to this, is, you know, as we focus on value-based care, as we focus on everything on how to reduce, inappropriate care, inappropriate expenses, it really comes down to cost. I mean, as we think about everything from triple aim, we have to be thinking about how are we going to reduce the overall spend. You stated it in the opening. You know, $1 spent in healthcare is $1 that's pulled away from whether it's schools or other expenses. And that is the pressure that we face. And so as we think through what are the different mechanisms, the different things around how do we help consumers, how do we actually build our networks, bring the system together so it works more holistically, it all comes down to, though, can we reduce that future spend? Because without the reduction in future spend, we're going to continue to be facing that same, challenge, and that challenge is how do employers continue to be successful? How is the state going to continue to be able to manage their budgets? So for me, it's everything that we do, it's how are we going to be actually able to impact overall healthcare spend across the state of Washington.
So, Representative Eileen Cody, luckily I'm looking at Tim and therefore I see you, and you know that I would love to have you on a keynote anytime you want to be on one. I see you sitting there. I think that's a very interesting question that you are well prepared to answer. Do you want to come on up to the stage and join us here? Because we've got an extra seat. Jamie, can we get a microphone? I'm going to let you take your time as you walk up. Thank you, Representative Cody. I appreciate that. Mark, let me ask you first. Yeah, let's give her a round of applause, right? You only get to do this kind of stuff if you, you only get to do this kind of stuff if people, if there's a sense of community here, and I just couldn't be more appreciative of all of you and all of you. Mark, she's here now, so I'm gonna let her take that. I'll tee it up for you differently. Give us a sense of what you expect to see in the 2018 legislative session related to this ongoing conversation about Medicaid spend, public employee spend, and the healthcare portion of the state budget. Are we relatively stable since it's a supplemental year, or do you feel like it's an ongoing conversation?
I would say the biggest question is what the feds are going to do with CHIP. That's the big concern right now, is whether we're going to run out of money or that they're not actually going to carry through and fund it, and how we would pay for that.
Yeah.
Because I think that we don't want to go backwards on that, so that's probably the biggest financial issue, that and coming up with the money for reinsurance, a few little things like that.
Yeah.
But on the big global issue, I'd say CHIP's the big
CHIP.
one.
And Mark, how about you? I mean, the exchange has been operational now for a few years. It went live for the 2014 plan year. You're a board member now for a few years. You've run healthcare systems back in the Midwest. How are you thinking as an exchange board member about this cost question, and what your agency, the agency that you help govern, how can that agency help on the cost question?
Well, first of all, I have a personal bias about moving away from fee-for-service to some kind of population-based construct. And part of that is as a result of my own experience. I was a regional vice president of a group health cooperative for a number of years in the 80s, and then I ended up managing a fee-for-service healthcare system. And the world is different. Mm-hmm. So when I was at group health, I was really looking at all the classic population management issues. And when I was in Pennsylvania, I'd get into the office in the morning, and the first thing I'd ask is, how many hearts did we do yesterday? Where are we on CT scans? And what do you mean our volumes are down? Yeah. And I don't think I'm an evil person, but I think that, in fact, that is the motivation of a fee-for-service system. So I'm very excited about the discussion about value-based purchasing. I'm very excited about what I see, but frankly, over the last 20 years, since the 90s, I've been very disappointed with the advancement. We talk a lot about it, but we're still doing a lot of things around the edges. We penalize people for readmissions. We are giving incentives to improve quality. But we need a transformation of construct. What's exciting about working on the exchange is that the exchange members are getting much more into policy development. It's not just managing the insurance entity that we're responsible for. I really enjoy working with my Republican colleagues as a Democrat on where we should go on policy issues. So I think this is a time of engagement. If I think back a year ago, we thought the ACC was going away. We didn't know where it's actually been okay. Our enrollment has been surprising. So I think this is a year of opportunity.
Yeah. So how about that, Tim, this question of the market isn't moving fast enough towards moving to value, moving from volume to value. I think that a lot of people in their quiet whisperings in the C-suite or the boardroom agree with that for all of the hullabaloo and maybe marketing, that outside of closed systems that are successful like Kaiser, there has not been as much movement to value as for all of the talk. And that's not specific to any one player. But do you see that in the same way, in the same terms? Or do you see that there actually are significant movements forward that are just not necessarily getting headlines?
I would say it's both. I think there's a number of different delivery systems that are rapidly moving. They're not waiting for, I always think about it as field of dreams a little bit. Are you going to build it and they will come, or are you going to wait till you have that audience? And I think we have a number of delivery systems in the state of Washington that are actually moving down that path without knowing they have the purchasers who are going to really sort of buy into what they're doing. So I think that's one facet. But the second facet, I do believe, is we're just now getting there at that precipice. Value-based care is just like the way consumerism used to be. We all have a different definition. We all are trying to balance and explore what's going to work. And we're going to have to be really effective of learning from each other and what does work and deploying that across the market. And it's going to really take a different level of sharing and something that we haven't really been used to historically. But I do think we're ready to move. But we got to recognize every area of the market will not move at the same rate. We're going to have to think about what can happen in urban, suburban, and rural very differently. And we're going to have very unique definitions. But the one challenge that we all face is healthcare is so local. And we have many purchasers, when it's in the state or in other locations, they have national programs. So as we think about what we're going to build here, we got to make sure that will that work for those large purchasers who have populations going across all 50 states, or at least a number of different markets, that how are they going to piece it all together? And that's something that, it becomes that what's shared across different states, how do we help move the entire, national market down that same path of where I think we're moving in Washington.
So Representative Cody, when you knew you were going to be on a keynote some years ago, and you were on stage with us, I asked you the question about whether the market needs public policy to push it forward. is the market moving fast enough on its own? And you said, to paraphrase, that yes, it does need some push because it's not moving fast enough. You've heard these stories for a long time, both as a nurse, a provider, and as a legislator. Where do you put this conversation in context or on the spectrum of how quickly we're moving to value? Is it enough, not enough? Where do you sort of contextualize that?
Well, I think it's never fast enough for me. That was one of the things yesterday. But I do feel like we're moving forward. I was very pleased this summer when the Healthcare Authority had the conference on value-based purchasing and the work that they've been doing. And it was actually a change for me because I was in the room and there were a lot of business representatives there that were talking about their value-based purchasing. And it was a whole different dialogue with those people than it is with the lobbyists for the business community in Olympia. They were moving in the same direction that we wanted to go, and I was like, hallelujah. So, and I really feel that the Healthcare Authority has been a leader. They're trying to get the plans now to offer the same kind of value-based purchasing that the state's doing, so that the smaller businesses that can't not everybody's a Boeing or Microsoft and can negotiate that on their own in their self-insured plans. So for the small businesses that are buying on the market, that they can get the same kind of value-based purchasing.
Mm-hmm. Do you see, let me sort of switch gears away from specific healthcare or health policy and ask about the new partisan dynamics in Olympia, Representative, specifically that the Democrats now control the Senate in addition to the governor's mansion in the House. Do you feel like that is going to provide an opportunity to move some things forward on the Democrats' agenda, or is it actually not that different? 25-24, 24-25 is very similar.
Well, I think the difference is that things can get heard that didn't get heard and may get brought up for a vote that didn't get brought up, but politically it's not that different. Mm-hmm. I've been there for all of them. The only thing I haven't had is a Republican governor. Otherwise, I've had all the combinations you can get. It doesn't change that much.
Yeah. Would you like a Republican governor just
no,
to
thank
top
you.
it off?
No, thank you.
Mark, you spoke with some passion and conviction that things aren't moving quickly enough. Or that we still have this sort of misaligned incentives to the vision. What are some specific things that you think the exchange can do to help drive that conversation? And what else do you think the exchange would need to be able to have more of an impact there?
Well, I'm interested in the exchange becoming maybe a little bit more involved in design and really setting some expectations about what we're looking at delivery. Now, there's not universal acceptance of that. Mm-hmm. There are some that say, we have a role here. We're kind of overseeing this health plan finder, and that's our job. I'd like to see us get much more involved in the discussion, because this is a complex discussion, and the exchange, I think, brings a lot of expertise to the table. I think people are looking for us to come up with some suggestions, and I would like to see the exchange more directly involved in the delivery discussion. I agree that the HCA is doing some great work. I think with the leadership transition there, I'm watching that very closely, because I think this could be catalytic in terms of transformation. But I'd like to see us more at that policy table, looking at this. This is complicated. It isn't simple. It's not just simply moving to value-based purchasing. You've got some huge issues here, and the policy balance is looking at how do you find the right balance between cost, quality, and access. And many years ago, people would say to me, Mark, you can't have all three, just pick two. And the fact is, if we've got cost and quality, we may be limiting access. So whatever we're doing, we have to constantly be involved in assessing how does this work, and really understand it's not going to be easy. And I'd like to see us at that table a little more proactively.
Let me ask you this question, Mark, and then Representative Cody, I'll ask you the same one. From the view of trying to regulate and guide the system, in Washington State, we have at least 8 agencies that do that have a role. We have the Insurance Commissioner, the Healthcare Authority, the Department of Health, DSHS, the Exchange, Department of Corrections is a big purchaser. Department of Labor is a big purchaser. The Attorney General, when he's not caught in traffic's office, is a big regulator. That's a lot of different ships to try to get moving in the same direction. Do you think that state government should become more, those agencies should become more centralized, maybe a merging of the OIC and HCA, or a merging of the exchange into the governor's office or into the healthcare authority or insurance commissioner? Do we need to consolidate there to keep pace with the consolidation that's happening in the market?
So my perspective on this is it has a lot to do with leadership personality. When I first came on the board, things were not cohesive with those entities. There was a lot of internal conflict that I observed. And I think, I'm sure Pam is here somewhere, I think Pam McCune has been absolutely wonderful. I think the commissioner has been terrific. I think our leadership at HCA has been great. We're around the table all the time. It's personality, it's leadership, it's not construct. You put construct all together, you put the wrong people in there, you'll have conflict. So I think we need to keep moving down that road with the people that we've got, and they're working very well, very collaboratively together.
Yeah. Representative, same question. The market is consolidating in many ways. Does the state regulatory apparatus need to consolidate to keep pace?
Well, we've made changes over the years, and I actually think with the move of when we finally get behavioral health totally over into the healthcare authority, that will really consolidate what we need to do. Mm-hmm. And I can go look back, and I don't know whether Linda's Parlette's here yet, but I think she's coming. Mm-hmm. We've sponsored a bill when we were kids back in the late 90s to try and do basically what we've done now with consolidating the different parts of healthcare into the healthcare authority. So I'm pretty happy. I feel like after 20 years, we finally got to where I wanted things. So no, I don't think we need to consolidate anymore. It's about the leadership and working together. I don't think it has to be any further, because the good thing about it is Department of Health has their public health focus. I mean, all those different agencies have a different focus, but they work together and they know who's in charge of each different little piece.
Tim, in terms of a plan like Regents interacting with the state as a regulator, but also as a vendor to the state to help manage their public employee lives, do you find that this sort of decentralization becomes problematic, or have you essentially figured out how to navigate that and got it dialed in your view?
If someone's completely figured it out, you can come tell me how to do that. No, I think in the end, though, while yes, there's different factions and potentially just they have some different priorities, in the end, when it's all said and done, you look at every area of Washington, I think they all have a similar mission. It's how they're going to get there may just be a little bit different, but the end goals are not different. They're really looking out for the health of the state, the well-being of the population. And I think that's what we always have to keep in mind, that while it may create some little bumps, it may create some different direction we have to go, for us at Regents, we need to be able to recognize that what their goals are is really trying to create that healthier Washington. And I think that's going to be part of it. As you look at the new policy and what the state is trying to pursue on a healthier Washington, that's really going to create some of that alignment when you look at the different entities. I think it brings strategically, they're coming to the table with an end vision. And again, we're going to learn as we go through that process, but I think we'll be able to get to a different outcome in the next few years.
How would you, Tim, characterize let me characterize first how smart my chess-playing friend Bob Ferguson is, who I think is now finally walking in. I'll ask you this question in a second, Tim, but first let's all give Attorney General Bob Ferguson a round of applause and welcome to the stage. Thanks for coming. You got a mic. Great. Representative Cody and Tim Lieb, market president from Regents, Mark Stensager on the board at the Exchange. We have been singing and dancing,
My apologies for the traffic in
okay.
North Seattle. Yeah, it was a bad accident.
Let me ask you this question here, Tim. The provider space has become relatively consolidated in Washington State over the last number of years. Do you find And all of the studies, it's pretty empirical now that price has 75% to do with market leverage and 25% to do with cost. How are you finding that provider consolidation in terms of cost management? And is a relatively decentralized payer market, not only by organizations but across lines of business, is that keeping pace in terms of managing costs in a consolidated provider market?
At this point, I don't think we've seen, the actual reduction in costs from the consolidation in the market. I think with what's coming together from the different delivery systems, how they're looking to consolidate systems, how they're looking to build out programs. Right now, I think it's still it's sort of a placing a bet. Will it create an outcome of future reduction in costs? At this point, we haven't seen, that materialize at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the delivery systems understand that that's what employers are demanding.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think that's when it's all said and done, no one questions that cost and how we're going to actually manage the end spend, being the triple aim, looking at outcomes, looking at all future trends. No one's questioning that that's what we have to accomplish. But I think we haven't seen any of the real true synergies yet from this consolidation at this point.
So let me use that to segue to you, Bob. Thanks for coming and being here. I appreciate it. I knew when I saw that this morning, I was like, he lives in Shoreline. This is not going to go well.
Not well, no.
How do you, I want to sort of get to this antitrust question and your office's activism there, and sort of segue from this consolidation, provider consolidation topic to that. Why don't you sort of sketch for us your thinking about where some of the red lines are related to provider consolidation? What are the things that your office is looking for to make sure you're protecting consumers within the context of the general trend that the Affordable Care Act has catalyzed some of that alignment or consolidation? Where are the lines that you look to make sure are not crossed?
Sure. So first, thanks so much for having me. Apologies for that bad accent up in downtown Seattle.
It wasn't your fault, I don't think.
But great to be here with all of you. And I guess a couple thoughts. So, first, just at a very high level, folks should know that the Office Attorney General, we enforce antitrust laws and our consumer protection laws. We have large teams in both those units. You'll be hearing from a couple of our attorneys this morning and on those kinds of cases. In terms of where the line is, I guess it's always challenging to say this is the line. Every case is fact dependent, of course, right? Use the law and the facts of every particular case. What I would say is if anyone is interested in knowing, hey, what is the line, folks on my team are happy to sit down and chat with you. We meet with, I'll use an example, auto dealers. We do a lot of areas of consumer protection with auto dealers. We meet with auto dealer leadership twice a year. We sit down, I attend those meetings, my attorneys attend those meetings, and we talk about what's going on, what kind of cases are we bringing, what do we see. They want to know, they want to abide by the law. It's the same thing with yesterday, we announced a lawsuit against Motel 6. It's a big lawsuit. We immediately have heard from the industry of motels saying, hey, we want to talk to you about where are those lines? What are we doing and are we doing the right thing? So that's the main message I'd say is talk to us. We're happy to meet and sit down and talk about what we see. Each case is specific. I guess what I would say is the antitrust area for our office, what we're doing while we have a larger unit now than we have in the past, I don't think there's anything especially new we're doing there. We've always been relatively active. On the consumer protection, charity care landscape, we have a much, much larger operation, and we are engaged in the healthcare industry in a way that I think it's fair we have never been before. I think that's, I draw a line there between our offices in terms of new work we're doing in the healthcare arena with consumer protection and charity care.
So talk more about that charity care piece. We still have a relatively, generally speaking, nonprofit healthcare system in Washington State, both on the provider and payer side. The idea of a nonprofit model is that there's a community benefit. Sometimes that community benefit is smaller or greater depending on the circumstances. You've brought a case that says, in one example at least, that charity care is not only not enough, but it was actively, I guess, not disincentivized or structurally attempted to be avoided. Maybe talk us through that case and just maybe some of the things that you've learned through that discovery process about how the nonprofit healthcare system works in Washington State related to charity care.
So I'll try and give a relatively short answer, so feel free to follow up. So these cases are big cases, they're complex cases, you might imagine. We do have 2 cases along the lines of charity care in Washington State. At a high level, as many of you know, there is an obligation set by our state legislature to provide charity care. The rules are very specific. You have to tell patients when they walk in the door up front about charity care and to fill out a form. The instructions are very, very specific. The cases that we have filed, from my standpoint, the allegations are very, very serious. In other words, management at those institutions communicating to their line staff, insist on payments every patient, every time, is a quote from senior management in one of those cases. Get a payment every patient, every time. That's not the law. You must inform everybody they have a right to charity care. That's number one. You ask for one piece of documentation to show their status financially is enough. We have a case where we allege that they insisted on multiple forms of information identification, which led to most people not being able to get charity care, even those who are eligible for it. Look, we have a law. Folks are eligible for this. Institutions should be aware of what that is. And I will just tell you that for any consumer protection case, I approve every one of them. I think sometimes folks think, hey, those AG lawyers are off doing their own thing and Bob's got no idea. Not true. I get a memo about every case. I approve the filing of a case. I approve any settlement. I approve whether we go to trial. I'm having those meetings. In a case like those cases, when I got the memo, I asked for the emails from senior management about how they instructed their staff to handle charity care. I'm reading those emails. I care intensely about this. Folks have a right to charity care. If institutions are not playing by the rules, very few things in my day will piss me off more than that. Just want you to know that. You should know that. Very few things will piss me off more than that. So we take that very seriously.
That's, even in private settings, that's as animated as I've seen you get.
I can be an animated guy.
Yeah.
In the right situation. Yeah. But it is, I really want to emphasize to folks that whether it's a small consumer protection case that impacts a dozen people or we're taking on the president, right? I approve every single one of those. There's not a small one or a big one to me. They're all important. I'm looking at each one. Now, some I will ask for more documents, and I'll get engaged on that level. Mm-hmm. And these are cases that would be examples of that.
So Representative Cody might remember a bill that was in the Senate Healthcare Committee that got a hearing, got a lot of press, and then sent the message and then died. But it was a bill, I think, in 2009, maybe it was 2008, that from Senator Kaiser and the senator from Issaquah, whose name escapes me, the Republican woman who's no longer in office. Flug, yeah, Cheryl Flug. On the books, apparently, no nonprofit in Washington State can have a compensation of its senior executives greater than the compensation of the governor of the state of Washington. The bill, that is law, if memory serves, the bill provided a mechanism to rescind the nonprofit status. I'm just wondering if the things that you are learning call into question some of the nonprofit status of some of the provider and payers in Washington State. Does that need to be reviewed? Does your office, which is activist by any measure, have an interest in reviewing that? Or is that because that maybe doesn't impact consumers, it's less of an interest?
Well, I guess I'm often asked for any case we bring, hey, does this case mean something else, right? The case against Motel 6 yesterday, what does that mean for ICE? Well, no, our cases against Motel 6, I try to keep our cases what they're about, mm-hmm. right? And industry practices. I guess I'd want to see that and see what that looks like. I don't want to say I'm not interested in that subject. Mm-hmm. I am, but my role when it comes to consumer protection is protecting consumers, right? That is the specific role of my office. So I'm interested in legislation. I'd be curious what that is. I'd want to learn more about it, obviously. Yeah. One thing I would emphasize is that within the world of consumer protection is, I think it's fair to say we have not, as an office, on the consumer protection side, really engaged in healthcare litigation like this before. I specifically, in growing our consumer protection division, I asked my team to hire individuals with an expertise in this area of the law. I mean, that was a concerted effort to be more engaged as an office on these kinds of cases. It is no accident. You will see only more and more of this going forward. I just want to kind of put that out there. This was a thoughtful exercise on my part to say, hey, I want to be engaged in this part of protecting consumers, and we hired to that end.
Mm-hmm. you were just so animated on that. Consumer protection, I want to just ask that question. Representative Cody, by the way, Representative Cody would have killed that bill had it gone over to her committee, I expect. Representative Cody, there's only one person I'm told Frank Chop is scared of, and that's you. And since most people are scared of Frank Chop, including, I'm sure, the Attorney General, who's not afraid of anybody, how do you think the Attorney General is doing as a Democrat?
That's a great question, DJ.
Well, I'll say the same thing I did about the governor. He hasn't gotten in my way.
What's that?
He hasn't gotten in my way.
I think I asked you that question about Governor Inslee, and you're like, he does everything I tell him. What do you, is it an appropriate role, in your view, Representative Cody, for the state within our federal system of government to be as activist vis-a-vis the federal government in lawsuits, in proclamations? Is it an appropriate role for the state of Washington from where you sit as a senior policymaker?
Well, sure, but we write laws to have them enforced.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. It's kind of like one of the things that happens a lot of the times is as legislators, is we get people writing, there should be a law, we have to do something. Well, there already is a law, it just isn't necessarily been enforced. So, yeah, I think that it's great.
And how have you found your experiences with CMS, maybe indirectly through the Healthcare Authority as they report back to you, but how are you finding working with the Trump administration now that we're a year in?
Oh, I have so much experience working. No, I would say, I think that the problem is that like they're not filling positions, and it's slowing down the work of government by not having the people's appointed or the jobs filled and that type of thing. I think is my biggest, well, maybe not the biggest concern, but one of my big concerns.
Yeah. Attorney General Bob Ferguson, I asked that question of Representative Cody to sort of tee up this question about your role vis-a-vis the Trump administration. How has that been on a personal level? I mean, that we've seen the stories in the news, and you've been a national figure, really elevated in a lot of ways as a result. You were standing at SeaTac early on when the immigration ban was put in place. How has that been personally to find yourself really in this very central and now activist role vis-a-vis federal policy and the federal administration?
Yeah, I guess I don't talk too much about how it is personally. I guess what I can say is, it's been a life-changing experience on many levels, for sure. My wife, Colleen, we have young children. She's a very private woman. She doesn't have a Facebook page. She's private. And so, people care. We've talked to our kids. The kids want to, why do people come up to me a lot when we're out and say, hey, thanks for the work your office is doing? They're curious about that. So, I just tell the kids look, people care about the work we're doing, and they have strong feelings about it, pro or con. I get that. I'm from a family of 7 kids. Believe me, at the Christmas dining room table, not everybody's in agreement on everything I'm doing or the governor's doing or Trump is doing, right? But so of course it's been life-changing from that standpoint. But at the end of the day, what we're focused on is, we've, I think, now brought 19 lawsuits against the administration. That was not my plan when he became president by any stretch of the imagination. If we'd had this conversation a year ago, I think I would have laughed if you'd said, hey, are you going to file 20 lawsuits against the president in the first year? But, our record is our record. 5 of those cases have been resolved. There's no more appeals. The cases are over. We've won all 5 of those. We're 5-0. We just won a 6th one. That's on appeal. That's the ban on transgendered individuals going to the military. We won that case. It's on appeal. But we haven't lost a case yet. So I get that people say, hey, it's a political thing. Well, how the hell is it political if we're 5-0? We haven't lost. Now, we're not going to win all of our cases against the Trump administration any more than we'll win all of our cases in any context, right? But we are very thoughtful about how we bring these cases. Jeff Sprung, one of my attorneys, you'll hear from soon. He's on a weekly call meeting that we have. We go through thoughtfully, hey, here's my criteria. Are Washingtonians being harmed? Do I have good legal arguments? And can I, as Attorney General, bring the lawsuit as opposed to an individual who might be harmed? Do I have the standing to come in court? If the answer to those questions are yes, yes, and yes, then I'm interested. It's pretty simple in a way. And so we'll keep doing it as long as we think, to Representative Cody's point, if we think the Trump administration is violating the law, I feel it's my obligation, my duty to do it. But I'm very proud of our record so far on those cases.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I was just going to say, I'm just as one person very proud to be represented by an attorney who is protecting the rights of individuals, whether they're residents or citizens or otherwise. So,
Thanks.
good job.
Thanks.
Keep going. What are you going to do after you're Attorney General?
It's the best job in the state. With all respect to Representative Cody, it's being Attorney General. It's I ran for Attorney General back in 2012. I guess it was. I would often be speaking to campaign events, and I'd often say, I'd explain what the office is, of course, but I often said I thought it was the most consequential office in government, being Attorney General. People always gave me a funny look. Look, they don't give me a funny look anymore. They just don't. That on a state level or on a national level, you're engaged in huge issues, and you have a lot of authority, right? You have a lot of authority to do what you think is the right thing to do, and we have a fantastic legal team that does that. So, but doing that in an independent fashion is always important. And look, I sued the Obama administration a couple times. Nobody said that was political, right? We just have more of that right now with the Trump administration than we've had in the past with other administrations.
So what you're saying is that you should be a candidate for Dancing with the Stars, given how well you danced around the question.
I cannot dance. Right? I cannot dance.
Yeah.
You don't want to see that.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to see that.
Well, I want to just say thank you to all of you for doing this and being flexible. Tim Lee, Market President at Regents Blue Shield, Representative Eileen Cody, the Chair of the House Health and Wellness Committee, Mark Sensauger, Board Member of the Washington Health Benefit Exchange, and Attorney General Bob Ferguson. Let's give them a round of applause, please.